I added it. I want to see what it looks like. All right. Welcome to the Cornhusker Corner, where there's no place like
This podcast.
oh my god, this podcast. As always, we're your host Blake and my brother
Brooks.
Brooks. So here we are, uh, Purdue week. Purdue week. Another away game for the Cornhuskers. Not a ton has happened this week, but there's been some things that we should probably talk about right off the bat. We had somebody enter the transfer portal, and
Right.
I've never Castaneda was one of his names. I just Isaiah
Isaiah Garcia Castaneda.
Garcia Castaneda. Um,
Come on,
yeah,
man.
I mean,
he
yeah.
had the best play of the year this year for the Scott Frost era. Come on, man. If we take look, like, let's be honest. Let's take a trip back to 4 weeks ago, 4.5 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. Yeah, 5 weeks ago. 5.5 weeks ago, actually. To the Northwest.
Six
No,
weeks
no,
ago.
no. 5.5. That's about right. To the Northwestern game. First drive of the year. First drive of the game. And pass from Casey Thompson to Isaiah Garcia Castaneda was the great catch. Let's be honest, these past 2 weeks have been great, but it still feels like a bit of a consolation, even at this point, because the season already has taken a downturn, and now we're kind of pulling our way out. So as nice as these wins have been, I don't remember a time where I was more joyful this year than right after Isaiah Garcia Castaneda's touchdown that game,
I
because it
mean,
just felt like, oh my God, like we're good. That's what it felt like.
yeah. No, you're right. I mean, you're right. I remember just the precision that we just drove the ball down that drive was just, it was exciting. You're right. It was exciting. And then our defense took the field. But,
Right.
um,
And he was never the same after that fumble. He fumbled later on in the game, and we can debate all day whether it was a good or bad call. It was probably a bad call, but he never played the same after that. He dropped a bunch of balls, fumbled another ball against, I think it was Oklahoma. I don't remember. Um, but yeah, so and I love the way Mickey put it in his press conference. They were like, Isaiah. They asked him a question about Isaiah entering the transfer portal. And he just goes, well, that's his right. He wanted to be the top receiver somewhere, and we can't do that for him. I was just like,
and listen, he's not a bad player at all, but our room is just stacked, especially with Hill, taking over one of those spots now as well. And the room is just too talented now to have
yeah,
anybody that just he wants to be a starter, but he's not a starter in that room. And it's really actually pretty encouraging, that
right.
he's the only name that has transferred since
Oh
Scott got
yeah,
fired.
and Tuesday was the last day that they could transfer until the actual transfer deadline, which is I think the
Yeah.
5th of December. So, and I know this will get tired, but yeah, I just love the way that Mickey put it too. Like, just so matter of fact. It's just like, yeah, I mean, he wants to be the top receiver somewhere, and it's not going to be here. So,
Yeah.
and I know this is like I said, is going to be kind of tired. People, well, that Scott Frost, comparing him to Scott Frost. Mickey and Scott Frost are two different people. Let's get that out of the way right off the bat. But I will say that I don't think we would have heard a comment that candid coming from Scott Frost, because it always felt like Scott just like had a way of protecting his players, and I don't mind when a coach protects his players, but he to the point where, I mean, think about it. We thought to basically, like, a lot of people had an idea of like what the running back depth chart was going to be going into this year, right?
Yeah.
Everyone had an idea, and basically what it ended up being was completely swapped of what Scott Frost was saying in the press conferences. I mean, Scott Frost can say enough good things about Gabe Ervin and Ramir Johnson going into the season, and then we didn't even really see them until we've seen Gabe Ervin, we still really haven't even seen Ramir Johnson. And so I do think it's funny. Like, Mickey is just such a black and white, gonna tell it like it is person, Um, it's the press conferences, you get more out of them because there's, that he's not going to beat around the bush. If he can answer a question, he's going to answer it honestly, and if he can't answer a question, he's going to tell you
Yeah.
he can't answer it.
And it's funny that you're saying that because before the season starts, you're like, these guys are masters at saying stuff and not saying stuff, but now they're saying stuff. So
Yeah.
it's probably just, it was a Scott Frost thing, like, don't say too much. And,
Yeah.
like, if you have
And
nothing
maybe
to
they didn't know
hide-
what to say. Maybe they didn't know what to say. Maybe they didn't know what to say, man. I don't want to trash those guys too hard, but it's just
No.
it's just so evident, especially defensively, the stark change. I mean, Mickey was asked at the press conference yesterday. He's like, "What do you think the main difference is in why our defense has played better?" He was like, "We have a new defensive coordinator."
Yeah. Yeah.
And he just left it at that. and
No,
yeah,
it's funny.
again, yeah,
Yeah, and now that we're going into, like, you talked about the press conferences a little bit, and we're not gonna talk in detail because there really isn't a lot of detail in terms of this Mark Whipple stuff that's coming out, like maybe some health problems with either him, some with his wife, or something's going on. And so there was
Mickey
talk,
basically
right?
goes, he's so old. He said it in a nicer way, but he basically goes, look, he's so old, he should be going around a cart anyway. Like
Yeah.
he said look, Whipple's been coaching for 46 years. I mean, he should probably be going around in a cart no matter what.
Yeah. No, so I want to try to do something, and I'm sorry for the podcast listeners here, but I'm going to try to share screen because I started watching his press conference today, Mark Whipple's, and, you have all this swirling around, and let me see if I can pull this up. Yeah. So I'm going to pull that up. I don't know if it's going to come through the stream or not, but this is just the opening image of him. And I don't know if you caught this too. But let's see. Let me play this for a little bit. That is the opening image.
Yeah. He just like, wait, play it for a second. He just like sits there for a second.
So, yeah. So it's like this opening image, and he's like, oh, back to himself.
Yeah.
But like,
he's
but
like
when it
having an
opens-
out of body moment.
Yeah, it's like it's so dramatic. He just, oh, okay, hurry up. But like
Yeah,
when
that's right.
when that first popped up, and I was just like, oh my gosh, he's about to die, and then he gets back to his normal self, and
Yeah, that Hell
Varsity.
Varsity edit is one thing. I saw a different one, Husker Online maybe. And
Oh, it was
they have a
longer.
couple more
Yeah.
seconds out front, and he's
Yeah,
just sitting there like dozing off into space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. I hope he's healthy. I like Mark Whipple. He seems like a nice guy. He reminds me a lot of one of my really good friend in high school's dads. And I think you'll probably know who I'm talking about. He just reminds me of a classic Northeastern hard nose Pennsylvania guy. I mean, like really, he just reminds me of so many of the guys up there. So I hope for his health, Mr.
Yeah.
Reardon. That's what I was thinking of, and I hope for his health.
Yeah.
And he's an important piece of it because it's not like we got an offensive coordinator, head coach anymore. Nobody else can take over play calling. That's as equipped seemingly as Whipple.
No,
So.
it's not like, you get rid of the defensive coordinator. I mean, you had guys in house that could definitely take over and do a competent job. Even if it failed, they could do the job. I look at our staff now, and you're like looking at what names could do it that have done it before, and there's not anybody really that could do the Bill Bush thing. Because Bill Bush has been around football a while. He's been on the defensive side of the ball before, but so I just don't think it's as simple as defense. Because defense, you can have a couple schemes, you get them right, and you can mix and match. But offense, you have to have an entire utility belt of different schemes and different packages. It's a lot more complicated.
Right. That's what one of the reasons. I mean, it's only one game, and Northwestern's 1-5 up to this point. But that's one of the reasons I was pretty impressed with Jim Leonard's first showing as Wisconsin's head coach. I mean, that's one of the things he had to do on that staff was retool the offensive staff and try to get him in the right direction. And like we talked about, he's a defensive head coach. And again, it's only one game, but they beat the living crap out of Northwestern, and we lost to them the very first game of the year. So.
Yep.
Yeah, one thing I did want to mention real quick, we haven't really got into much coaching search stuff as of late for good reason. There's not
boring
really
right now.
Yeah, it's
I
boring.
mean,
There's not yeah,
the
there's not
season's
really
still going on.
yeah, there's not really much to talk about. Plus, I think a lot of Nebraska fans are in a sort of mode where we're all sort of coming around to the idea of potentially Mickey maybe getting this done, at least to now. Look, we've had 2 conference wins in a row. So, but I will say the other day there was news out of the NFL that one prime candidate for our coaching job became available. It's Matt Rule. He was the coach of the Carolina Panthers. Wasn't a great NFL coach by most people's accounts. Never could get the offense going. Always sort of had a mercenary for quarterback.
Yeah. But
You could speak more on it. You're an NFL guy.
yeah, so here's the thing with Rule, especially in the NFL. You're right about the quarterback. He never had the set guy, like this is the guy you're going to build around. He did have that at running back. He had like some weapons on defense. Like they had like decent teams if you looked at their roster. The quarterback was a big question mark. But Teddy Bridgewater's a decent quarterback. Gets hurt a lot. But Baker Mayfield comes in. Like he lost his job because you take Baker Mayfield, who had his ups and downs in Cleveland, but he made some bonehead mistakes. That's just his game. He plays very much like Johnny Manziel kind of.
A little bit more refined, but I agree.
A little bit more refined, but he's pretty erratic for an NFL quarterback. But it didn't look like they had even an identity. He didn't look like they had the coaching. There was some stuff like that were definite coaching mistakes this year that lost them some games. So
yeah, I watched a couple of their games. They were not fun to watch. And I will say this about Baker. Baker's footwork looks like Drew Brees. I mean, his footwork is really good. His footwork looks like Drew Brees, but his decision making looks like Johnny Manziel. That's what's interesting about it. It's like because Johnny Manziel was just a gamer in college because he's a really good athlete. And once he got to the NFL,
circles and toss up the ball and have his
100%
5-star receivers make plays.
And when you get to the NFL, and you have 5-time Pro Bowlers at the end rushing you down, it's not the same thing. And his lack of fundamentals really showed themselves. Enough of a tangent on Johnny Manziel. We're on Matt Rule. So Matt Rule has emerged. I mean, we've been talking about him. I think we mentioned him on the podcast before.
We mentioned him.
He has a hell of a track record at the college level. I do want to make a note that one thing that almost nobody talks about with coaching candidates these days is some of these guys, once NIL became a thing, some of these guys and their coaching styles and their philosophies are going to reveal themselves as being archaic, they're going to be a little bit of dinosaurs. And I think that's coming to fruition at certain places. I won't name names, but I think if you're listening, you probably have a couple places in mind. Matt Rule, no, definitely not. No. Let's say Death Valley #2. Let me just put it that way. Anyway, so Matt Rule was a very successful program builder. He built a lot of success at Temple over the course of 3 years, I believe it was. They improved every year. They were a good team. I remember I watched them, actually. Houston played them in the ACC championship. I was at that game, and they played hard. They were a good team. I mean, and then he goes to Baylor.
And those Temple teams, they were playing against good Houston teams.
Yes.
Like it was when and Navy was still they've taken a couple steps back, but playing Navy was tough.
Oh yeah. Houston had some elite athletes, and so did, Navy had really, really good athletes too, but they ran they ran that old school triple option, but
Yeah.
they ran it so well that year, and they were a tough team. Anyway, so Rule had success in a league that you look at it, it's AAC, blah, blah, blah. But Temple isn't even an easy place to win in the AAC. Okay, it is not an easy place to win,
It's
and he
Philly.
won, and he won there, and
Yeah.
and then he goes to Baylor. He goes to Baylor right after the whole Art Briles scandal. I won't get into that, but it was a very touchy and tumultuous time for the program, and they needed a guy to come in and be a culture builder, to be the face of the program, and to just be a good guy that everyone likes. And so that was one of the reasons they actually went with Matt Rule, because I mean, that's the thing about Matt Rule is it's hard not to like Matt Rule when you watch him in press conferences. He's a nice guy, and he seems like he really knows what he's talking about, and you can see why his players rally around him. Anyway, takes Baylor. They go 2-7 the first year, or 1-7, something like that. They had a horrible record. That's not even 12 games, but they went bad. They had a bad record in that first year, and then they had a pretty good year in their second year, and then went 11-3 in his third year. And then he moved on in the NFL, and then Aranda came in right after that. So Matt Rule has his coaching record for the better part of a decade is basically of him building and having success at places where it's hard to have success, places that are considered little brothers in their league. And in the case of Baylor, it was in a very tumultuous time, similarly to the resume point that everyone makes on Bill O'Brien. Whole different situation, but very similar in job scope from a coaching perspective. And so Matt Rule has a lot of people's attention and a lot of people's respect for that regard. For me, I wouldn't be crazy about it, but let me just put it this way. As long as it's not Matt Campbell. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Matt Campbell. Like, the way he's been coaching lately, you don't want to take. Let me ask you this: Matt Rule coming off of a tumultuous NFL career, does that give a guy a funk? Let me ask it to you in a bigger, broader way. Do you take a guy who's coming off of some recent, maybe he's had success before, but he hasn't had success in recent years, right? Like Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell is an example of that. He's had what is to be considered really good astronomical success at Iowa State, 8-win seasons, 9-win season, I believe. And this year he might go 5-7. Matt Rule, as I said, is a proven program builder, but that's before all the changes in procedures, before the NIL era. Things change, and he's coming off of tumultuous, no success in the NFL. So this is the way I look at it is you don't want to take someone's baggage if you're Nebraska. You know what I mean? You have enough baggage if you're Nebraska. You don't need to be taking a coach that also needs to get over the hump. That's the way I look at it. I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? I don't know if I need to lump Matt Rule in there, but he sort of meets those parameters as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And, I think you're right on the point of the whole baggage thing, especially when it comes to Matt Rule. Sorry, I was trying to pull up a funny image of him that I had in my head. He does this little thing with his teeth that goes, and he does that all the time.
And he's always wearing vests. He's always wearing those windbreaker vests with the hood.
He is. Hold on, I'm gonna share this image search with you. It's really funny, but because you're right, there's all these there's all these windbreakers, but you're right when you're going on the NFL train, right, and you're trying to have success in the NFL. It's completely different than college. It's night and day, just completely different. So I wouldn't be as pissed off as if they went with somebody. It's the same reason why Urban is still in the conversation, right? Because he's a proven commodity in college. He's just a winner, and he sucked in the NFL because it's a different animal. Very few college coaches have gone to the NFL and done well.
Right.
I mean, Pete Carroll, has had success, but it's still like.
Well, he had
Not
one
really.
stint in the NFL before he was at UFC. He wasn't any
Yeah.
good in the NFL. Then he went to USC, won all those titles, or one title. Was it one title or two titles? I don't remember.
In SC, I think
In the
he won
early
two.
2000s,
Yeah.
two titles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, so he won titles at USC, and then he goes back to the NFL, and he wins a Super Bowl. And so, I'll put it to you this way. I would take Matt Rule over Zach Taylor any day of the week. Let me just put it to you that way. Because
Okay.
Zach Taylor, while he is in Nebraska, and that seems like that, I'm surprised that you don't agree with, or I don't know. You haven't spoke yet, but to me, Zach Taylor is exactly what you're talking about. He's proven it for a year in the NFL. We'll see how they go this year. But he's a young guy who's never coached in college at all. Whereas Matt Rule, while he wasn't a great NFL coach, and that's been pretty much proven at this point.
Yeah.
He has a track record in college. So for that reason alone, and I haven't heard Zach Taylor's name coming up that much, but that was just something I was thinking about when we were talking about this. I would take Matt Rule over something like Zach Taylor.
No, and you're right. It's not even just the optics, the way that you have to win. You can have good magical seasons in the NFL. You just can. Look at Doug Peterson. Even though I think he's a good coach, we had the really great one Super Bowl winning season, and then the rest of his years there, if you just look at him in a microcosm of that one season being great, we're up and down, poorly coached teams. Some of that was like the management selling the house, and we didn't have cap space, so you had to trade players and do this. But that's the NFL. So,
well, that's Philadelphia. It's hard to.
Okay.
It's just funny from Philadelphia perspective. It's like they ran Andy Reid out of town. You know what I mean? Andy Reid's a legend. You know what I mean? Like,
you're right.
I think Doug Peterson's a great coach. Like, I still don't understand he couldn't get his quarterback situation. He couldn't get it figured out.
It was just the COVID season. And people were tired because 2 years ago we were in the Super Bowl, and then we're, not even making the playoffs. But anyway,
well,
that's
you're also
situation.
great. You're also so far a great team this year, so it's hard for me to criticize. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So far, you look really good. This week's going to be really interesting in that regard. They're playing the Cowboys, right?
Yeah, on a
Sunday night
football.
Is it
Sunday
Monday night or
yeah.
Sunday night?
Sunday,
Yeah.
right.
All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
Sunday.
So are we gonna get Tony? Are we gonna get Romo?
I don't know.
Dude, Tony Romo doing the Eagles and Cowboys game. That would be epic.
Okay, want to know something that is trippy this year on the last point on the NFL, and we'll get back to the
sorry.
conversation.
It's all good.
But the trippy thing is watching Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime and having Herb Street there, calling the game. It's kind of weird.
I do like Herb Street, but yeah,
I do too. And he's a fine announcer. But I think it's funny. Like, he knows all these guys from college, and he knows them from college really well. So he's really focusing on like the college. And then I think it's Mike Musburger that's with him or something. He's just like, yeah.
It's Al Davis.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, there's something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, that's funny because when I have conversations with my friends that are big NFL fans, they'll bring up a player. I'll be like, oh, I know that guy. That guy played at Ole Miss. I'll be like, oh, I know that guy. That guy played at Georgia Tech, or where. You know what I mean? Like,
that's funny.
Yeah. So it's kind of similar to that. He was talking about that on Pat McAfee's show. He was saying it was going to be quite a challenge to have to learn college rosters at the same time while learning NFL rosters. But when he cracked down to sit down to do it, he realized, oh, like all these guys played in college.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay,
there
he is. There he is. In that, I thought that was a funny picture. But yeah, you're right. If you go into here and you just scroll, look at like all
it's
these,
all the
like,
vests.
The vests and the there's one from Baylor down here that has the hood. Yeah, the hood.
Yep. Adidas got to get one of those made if we hire him. I don't know. It
You're
wouldn't be a
right.
bad hire. It wouldn't be my first
No.
choice. I don't think it'd be the match made in heaven fit. I do want a guy that's not just going to stepping stone us too. I don't know if that's Matt Rule, but he's stepping stoned places before.
Two places.
That Yeah. So when I say a non-stepping stone guy, the guy who immediately comes to mind is Lance Leipold. This seems like if Lance Leipold is going to take a job like a Nebraska or a Wisconsin, he's 62 or 63, something like that. This would be his most likely his last destination.
Yeah. And
So
I know you're really high on him. And they almost beat an undefeated TCU team with a backup
they did.
quarterback.
Yeah, they had depth at the quarterback position, better depth at the quarterback position than Oklahoma, dude. Like that was one of the big talking
Nebraska.
points. Well, we'll see about that. We haven't really had to use our quarterback depth yet. But Oklahoma, they played their backup quarterback who was like, I don't know, a second string at Pitt or something like that a couple years ago. He looked terrible. He looked terrible.
Awful.
Meanwhile, Kansas's backup quarterback, like he runs a 4.5 in a straight line and can like throw darts.
Yeah, I think
So
part of
gotta
his
respect
success-
Leipold and what he's done. You gotta respect Leipold and what
Part
he's
of that
done.
guy's success though is he's been on the field this year. They've used him a lot.
Oh,
the
really?
backup.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they
What-
have
what-
packages for him for like running, and I think he's been on split for like receiver a couple times, and
which
seen him
means
on
he
the
gets
field
reps in
before.
practice too.
Yeah.
So
So that helps.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so no, I know what you're saying about Leipold. I know what you're saying. I just
Mickey.
you, this is his big test. This is his big test this week. It really is. This isn't a make or break for like if he gets the job or not. But as far as the rest of the season goes and the team, this week is huge. If we can pull out a win this week, I think this team is going to have its mojo, and then it's going to get real interesting. We're going to be two
Let me
wins
ask you
away
this.
from a bowl, and
Let me ask you this. Let me pose a
Yeah.
question to you. Just theoretically, let's just dream for a second, okay?
okay.
Let's just dream for a second. If Nebraska wins the game this weekend emphatically, let's say they win the game emphatically, we go into Purdue and we beat them by 2 or even 3 scores. Let's just say theoretically. Is it possible for Mickey to win the job this weekend? Because the sentiment around Husker Nation really, really feels like it's turning towards Mickey. And the 3 win in a row thing, after going on the road, beating Purdue like that, could earn a lot, going into a bye week, could earn a lot of favor in that way. Now, if you're Trev, to me, if you're Trev, what you're thinking about is, well, the black shirt thing, right? I've heard a lot of people mention that lately, which is like, yeah, we want them to get the black shirts, but every time they get the black shirts, we get our asses kicked in the next game. It's like if you're Trev and you see him on a 3-game win streak, and then you take the interim tag off of Mickey and you give him a contract, and then he goes 0-5. You know what I mean? It's like
Exactly.
and you want to, yeah. So I've thought about it, maybe, but it would be I'd be surprised. I would be surprised.
What an interesting question that you just
Yeah,
posed. Do I think he gets the job after this week? No, I don't think so. The thing I think that he is doing, you see, when we've talked about it before, you see him engaged, you see him on the sidelines, you see him coaching. I know, shocker for a coach to do, but you see the guys buying. You see the guys buying in. You see the guys buying him, wanting to play for him. When really they could have all left. They could have all transferred. And we had one guy who had a valid reason to transfer. It wasn't that he didn't want to be there. It's that he couldn't do what he wanted to do there. So, I don't know. Something good he's been doing is the media. I think he's won over the media, definitely, with his conferences, just, how he coaches in general, how he talks about the team. He's very realistic. He'll call out things that he does wrong, and he's not afraid to call out players. Coaches in the past and coaches in general, I think, do players disservice when they want to, save their feelings, especially in press conferences, because, like, oh, I need to do better. I need to do better. I don't want him talking about me. Like, keep my name out your wife's mouth,
I think coaches toe the line with what they say to a player's face or around the team off the record versus what they'll say about a player in a press conference, which is right. It is right. But I do see, like, if a player's being chewed out in practice and then they go into press conference and you say, how's this player doing? And the guy goes, oh, he's great. He's one of the best players on the team and blah, 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 blah. And then so if you're a player, you're like, I just got chewed out in practice and now, you know what I mean? So there's a little bit of consistency that's been applied across the board. Look, I don't think we've had a coach like Mickey at Nebraska in a long time. And I'll say the same thing about Coach Bush. The way they conduct themselves on the sideline, the way they conduct themselves in press conferences. Coach Bush is he's one of I'm getting the sneaking suspicion, and we've had 2 games to see it, but I'm getting the sneaking suspicion that he might be one of the best kept secrets in college football. This dude can coach his ass off, okay? And not only can he coach his ass off, he can recruit his ass off. I was looking at the best players from the early Bo era. You know who recruited all of them? Bill Bush. I didn't know that. Amukamara, 2-star. Bill Bush found him.
Amukamara was a 2-star?
And Bill Bush found him. Like, all these dudes that, like, and there's more. I could drop a lot of them, but I wouldn't be able to, like, accurate. Prince Mukamara is the only one that I remember for sure. But there was a number of names on that list from that era that were Bill Bush gets. And I'm just like, yeah, like, and now you look at it, he's taken over the defense, and not only have they looked a little better, look, people want to say, oh, it was Indiana and Rutgers. Okay, well, we lost to Northwestern. Okay, well, we gave up 642 yards to Georgia Southern. Okay, well, we had a legitimate game with a 16-play drive that was levied against us by an FCS team. Like, what are we even talking about? These were 2 conference games where the defense didn't just look better. They looked like a completely different team. They were firing off the ball. They were making their tackles for the most part. Their missed tackles were cut in more than half in each of those games on average. I mean, they averaged 13-plus missed tackles going into the Indiana game. Yeah. And in those 2 games, they had like 6.
Yeah, it almost looks like, and we talked about this when Scott got fired, how the team was playing like they were trying to play because they knew their coach was trying to be fired. So they were like trying really hard. Sometimes when you try too hard, you don't play very well because you're trying too hard. You're not just playing the game. And, they kind of had that. And damn. And then once Chenander's gone, I mean, if we had our bye week, and we definitely could have in between the Oklahoma game, because now looking at Oklahoma, that game is probably our worst loss of the season. And it really is. It's our worst loss of the season. Because, first game under Mickey, get the momentum, definitely could have. We are one Dylan Gabriel, I believe, because I was in the stadium and we could feel it. One Dylan Gabriel scramble, like touchdown scramble, away from that game being broken wide open. I really do believe that. But yeah, the defense is playing completely different. And if you look at it, since Scott was fired, how many points have they given up in the second half?
0.
No, since Scott was fired. 7.
In the second half, 7. You're right
7.
About that.
7
even in the Oklahoma
half.
game.
And then even in the Oklahoma game, they weren't really trying.
The game was over. But to be fair, that score in the Oklahoma game was because our offense came right out on the field and fumbled and gave them the ball on the 35-yard line. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so they didn't put our defense in the best position either.
No.
And they haven't all year. Sorry, they haven't all year.
Chenander's gone. Okay. Chenander's gone, and no points in the second half. And Bill Bush was very gracious in saying, like, the players, they went out and, they knew what they had to do. And yes, to a point, but also halftime adjustments are a thing. you see what they're doing on offense, you make your adjustments, and you go. The most time you have to do that is halftime. And so they have made defense adjustments at halftime that have proven to work, and that's coaching. So, it's one of those things that you just, it's a quantifiable thing you can see. And we haven't seen it as Nebraska fans in a really long time. So it's kind of like, oh, what is that?
Yeah.
So.
Well, okay, so we're leading up to the Purdue game, and we've talked about our defense. I am starting to gain a little bit of confidence in them, but there's one glaring issue about this game, and it's something we haven't really touched on yet. It is our offensive line, and I thought Casey's, and I thought Casey's comments in the press conference for his thought process about the game was like the most telling thing about our offensive line. He was like, I knew the defensive line, I knew the rush, they were going to start getting tired at some point. That's what I mean, he actually said that. He goes, I knew they were going to start getting tired at some point, and they did. So he didn't even think like maybe my offensive line will start protecting. He said, no, they're going to slow down. They're big guys. They're not going to be able to run that fast for that long. So that puts it into a little bit of perspective as to what Casey is seeing when he's out there. I mean, you've probably been a quarterback on a team with a bad offensive line. What does it feel like?
Yeah.
Come on.
Your internal like clock that you have in your head when you're passing goes from 3 to like a second and a half before you start freaking out. Not freaking out, but before you really start thinking about it, and then it infects like you're playing and all that.
Whereas before you might be able to get 3 reads in, you can only get really like 1 read in.
Yeah, and one thing that I think that how we can counteract that, just from an offensive play, standpoint, and it's hard because Casey's banged up now, to take him seriously as a runner, but get the quarterback involved in the runner. Because he has had a couple good runs here and there, but he hasn't been a part of the offense like that. They can't rush as hard as they are every single play if they respect you as a runner. That was one thing that Martinez had, which is why our offensive line seemed to hold up, and then he just held onto the ball too long. That's not really happening. The first half that happened a lot. You do have to give the offensive line a little bit of credit that way. He was holding on the ball a little too long. Especially in the first.
Not
half.
Adrian Long though. Not as long
Adrian
as
Long.
No,
not Adrian Long.
No.
But so that's one way that's one way you can help your offensive line is just to establish that run. So they have to second guess their play call, and then another one is just moving out of the pocket. I don't think we've seen him throw on the run a lot, but he has a good arm. It's not that hard to throw on the run. It's really not.
I mean. This is highlighting a good point, which is that some of this falls on a lot of this actually falls on the offensive coordinator, falls on Whipple.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a couple of things that he could do, which is roll the quarterback out, get him involved in the run game, stuff like that. I agree. Another thing is screen passes. Like, can we execute a screen pass this year, please?
Now,
you know what I mean? Like
screen passes.
Yeah, we do, but we don't execute them. Like, we can't get those perimeter blocks once the ball's thrown. We just can't. Like, we set it up well, but once the ball's in the dude's hands, everyone whiffs on the perimeter block. And it's just, dude, there was one that was set up for Grant beautifully the other day, and he had a lane and everything, but somebody just whiffed on their block, and then he ended up having 2 guys right on him. But that's another big thing. Screen passes.
Holding on Alante.
Yeah, I remember that one. But the screen passes and, I mean, just the quick passing game. You know what I mean? Concepts where Casey only has to make 1 or 2 reads. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, those are things too where it's like, man, if you're Whipple, like the whole game you're trying to get that long bomb to Trey Palmer set up, and that's great. But sometimes it's not, especially in Big Ten play. Sometimes it's not going to be there on the first drive. Matter of fact, a lot of times it's not going to be there on the first drive because Casey's just not going to have time to let that to go through that progression. So short, quick progressions, really, in summary, is a lot of what he could do. And I think he'll adjust. Look, we have tackles right now that are grading out as a 0 on PFF, which means on pass plays they didn't protect the quarterback once. They didn't stop anybody. Like, so as an offensive coordinator, you got to adjust to that. And I think Whipple's figuring that out, but they also got to figure out the personnel because, I mean, there's only so much you can do. Um, they started Hunter Anthony over Benhart, I believe. He got more snaps this game. People have mentioned moving Nash Hutchmacher to offensive line. I've also heard people say, moving certain people more outside, moving other people in. I mean, look, that's a coach's job, especially an offensive line coach. You got to diagnose who has the feet to play tackle and who doesn't, because being a guard is much different than being a tackle. Being a guard, you got to have good feet still. I mean, you're not going to be on a football field unless you got good feet, but still at a guard, you're more in a phone booth. A lot of the blocks you make are just supported by the sheer amount of humanity that you have around you down there in the trenches a lot of the times. Whereas if you're a tackle, most of the blocks you're making, especially on pass plays, are going to be out in space, and you got to be light on your feet. And just none of these guys, I just don't understand. None of these guys that are playing tackle for us, I don't know if it's a coaching thing or if it's a technique thing or if it's just pure athleticism, but they're on skates, every single one of them.
Yeah, and the tackles.
Every single one of them.
I mean, you know as well as I do that there's a reason that NFL tackles are paid so much money. It's a hard position to play, and if you don't have somebody that, is your guy there, because we have, like, I think you said it during the game, we have guards playing tackles. We don't have that, especially on the left side. We don't have that, which is, the most of the time the blind side of the quarterback, which is why it's so important. We don't have that game breaker guy there. We just don't. But, I think they're doing the best they can. I really do. I mean, you see them on a couple plays just completely whiff. But, when they're engaging the guys, they're not getting completely blown off the ball. Defensive guys are making plays here and there. But their actual engagement, when they get the guy good, they get him good. So, I don't think,
I think a lot of our supplemental blockers are good too, meaning like tight ends and running backs. I feel bad for the running backs on protections because a lot of the times the situations they're getting in is like they're having to choose between 2 or 3 different guys. Have you noticed that? Where it's like the running back's like, all right, I'm gonna block for the pass, and then like it's like 3 different dudes, and he's like, oh shit, who do I choose? And then by the time he's chosen, it's too late. And that's what happens. But I do think our tight ends block well. And Anthony Grant, this was in the Indiana game, but he had a lead block on Casey's touchdown going into the end zone, the final touchdown of the game. He put a dude on his complete butt. Oh, and this last game too, Grant had a play. Grant had a play where the famous one where he had the ball, but there was another one where he literally trucked an offensive line or a defensive lineman, dude. Just completely trucked a defensive lineman, knocked him on his butt. And it wasn't even like a crackback type of, like I caught him in between steps type of hit. Like, no. He got under his pads and beat this dude. And this dude was like 330 pounds, put him on his butt. And I'm like, can we have Anthony Grant, can we have him sprinkle a little bit of that onto some of our offensive line guys? But I do see your point. Because I don't know if they're being out physicaled. I agree with that, actually. I think they're being out techniqued in a lot of cases and schemed. I don't know what their protections look like from a fan's perspective, and even from a Pro Football Focus perspective, the grading service. They don't know the plays. You know what I mean? So they don't know what the offensive lineman was asked to do, and it's hard to tell in that sense because he could have a completely different assignment, and it could have been the guard's fault, and we would have no idea. You know what I mean? But yeah, so offensive lines really got to come together, and they gotta be serviceable. We can't be giving up 21 pressures in a game, which was what we gave up against Rutgers. 21 pressures, 1 sack. That's crazy. And Whipple talked about it. He goes, that's the most deceptive stat of that whole game was that they only got 1 sack. Yeah, very true. Very true.
Yeah, very true. So there's a stat that I want to try to pull up here that I saw that was circulating on social media. Let me see if I can pull it. Yeah, here it is. So this is on the top wide
Yes.
receivers in college football through 6 weeks. So look, there's 2 Ohio State guys there, and Nebraska, Trey Palmer. So I don't remember the last time that we had a dude perform like him, or ever, because he's on track to beat almost.
I heard
like,
someone
a
say
lot
it
of
today,
records.
and it like almost made me do a spit take. Irving Fryer, literally like the last time we've really had a receiver that has the intangible stuff that Trey Palmer has is like Irving Fryer, dude.
Yeah.
Like this dude is gonna be a potential NFL. I mean, he's probably gonna be a second or third round pick. At the receiver spot. We'll see. I'm no expert. I thought JoJo was going to get drafted in like the first round last year. So, so
Yeah.
we'll see. I remember I posted on Husker Max. They were like, "Who do you think is going to get drafted?" I listed like 20 players or something. I got laughed at. It's like, I don't care. These dudes are good. I'd take them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean JoJo is legit. I still think he's a steal for anybody that got him, which is Indianapolis, right?
Yeah.
He's
and
on
he made he
Indianapolis.
made the squad too. I saw him on TV.
Yeah. Did he play? Is he playing?
I think it was special teams. I think he made a tackle actually.
Oh. Okay, so let's get into this Purdue game.
Yeah, let's get into it.
They have a dynamic offense. Aiden O'Connell is their starting quarterback for the 12th year in a row, and he's a good quarterback. He's got a lot of tools. He can make a lot of throws. He's going to put the ball in a position for his receivers to make a play. Their most notable receiver is a guy named Chris Jones, who is a transfer from Iowa, and he's got. I heard this the other day. He's got more receiving touchdowns this year than Iowa's offense has total. So I think he made the right decision going to Purdue because their offense is dynamic and their offensive line is a bit beat up, as a lot of offensive lines tend to get this deep in the year. Here we are almost halfway through the year. Look at that. But their offensive line is a little beat up, so we'll see what the matchup looks like there. And they have a ragtag. I watched a couple of their games. They have a ragtag group of walk-ons as their running back core, pretty much. And and look, that doesn't sound good on paper when I say a group of walk-ons as their running back core, but these dudes can run. I mean, they're good. They're good. Guy number 47, I believe his number is. Anyway, I don't know any of the running backs' names because they're walk-ons, but they're good. So,
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So I pulled up the stats here.
Alrighty.
Just for ESPN, the matchup predictor that checks out. But if you look at here, points per game 28. That's not insurmountable, especially because
plus
we haven't
14,
scored a lot
minus
of points.
14. Look at
Yeah.
this spread, man.
Yeah.
Two touchdown spread.
It opened up at 11 and it's gone up.
Let me ask you this: when's the last, and through all this turmoil, when's the last time we've had a spread that steep when we're not playing like Ohio State or Michigan or a team like that? I can't really remember. remember. You know what? And you know what's funny? It kind of puts a little bit of a smile on my face because think about it. Like every game going in this is like, how the hell are we a 3-point favorite? We've lost our last 6 games. Or like, how the hell is this? Are we only a 2-point dog? Like, our defense just gave up 642 yards to Georgia Southern or something like that. But this one is like, okay, Vegas has finally accepted. They're like, okay, we're gonna make them two touchdown dogs. We're gonna make them 2 touchdown dogs. What do you think of that? That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it, and these stats here, I think they're really skewed just because of how poorly the first couple games of our season went, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And so, if you look at it like that, and then you're looking at the numbers, we're not that far off. especially like on the yards allowed. I mean, rush yards, that's pretty bad. But I mean, if you look at it and just think about how historically bad those first like couple games were at the beginning of the season, that's not that bad. They're playing better now. So, I mean, yards allowed, it's skewed because those are averages. Um, you know, I don't know. I don't know.
Now, this is arguably the best. Well, it's arguably the best team played so far this year, and it's arguably the best defense for sure. The only one I would say maybe is matches up is Rutgers. Their defense was pretty good. Shiano usually has pretty well coached and stout defenses.
Yeah.
That's the only one maybe, but Purdue has a good defense. They got a lot of veterans, a lot of 5 and 6 year guys. And Bill Bush, I mean, he's not coaching against their defense, but Bill Bush used an interesting word to describe their team today in the press conference, which is gifted. He kept saying gifted, and which is that's quite a high praise in my book. Gifted. That's like that's pretty good. So this is going to be the best team we've played so far. Nebraska is finally coming around and playing good football. We think that this is a completely different team than they were before, but they're about to have a chance to definitively prove it. Because this weekend, if they win, then they are playing good football, and this is a definitively better team than they were before. So that's my point. This weekend is the time that they have to prove that. I think I have a suspicion that they are, but here we go. This is a real game.
This weekend is definitely the litmus test of the new coaching staff. You know, they had a longer week to prepare because we played on Friday, so they had an extra day
And to recover.
So that might actually play into it because a couple of our guys were a little bit banged up, especially Casey. That dude's tough.
Very tough.
But yeah. So in terms of this matchup, if like you said, they have a ragtag group on the running back, and if you looked at those numbers, their leading rusher has like 275 on 50 carries. And, Grant has 647. So just comparatively, we've been watching Nebraska all year. I mean, he's had some good runs here or there. He's by no means won us the game on the ground for his legs. He's made plays. He's got us in position, but it's been kind of a team effort. If we can stop their passing game, we win walking away. And I really do think that because our run defense has been doing a lot better. I think even it might have been Robinson in a interview one of the conferences this week. He said it's different how we're like rotating. He said I'm out of breath like a lot less. I come out feeling refreshed, and I think we got a good groove going. And that shows, especially on the defensive line. Because those guys just always looked gassed and out of breath, but they haven't. So I think if we can get some pressure on the quarterback, especially, look for it to be possibly going the other way. But yeah, let's we're at 53 here. Let's get into the actual score predictions here.
Yeah. So my thought process on this is. Purdue's a good team, and if Nebraska plays as bad as they can play, because we've seen them play very bad this year, okay? So if they play as bad as they can play, Purdue will win by 2 scores, and they'll cover.
Yeah.
I'm still not saying that it'll be like a romping 49-10 sort of very sad. I don't think it'll be that. I just don't think it'll be that. I don't want to say too much because then, this will get clipped. Anyway, so my thought process is in 2010, Or actually, let me go back even further. In 2007, Nebraska was the top 15 team to start the year, and I was excited. I thought they were going to be very good, and they got trashed by USC, went 5-7 that year, and were terrible, and they let us down. Then Bo Pelini takes over. They had one pretty good year as his first year, and then a great year as his second year defensively. And so then in 2010, we come out and our offense looks like they're looking, and I'm like, oh my God, here we go, here we go. I started drinking the Kool-Aid again. Then they let us down against Texas. And it was not a bad year, but I felt let down. I feel like a lot of fans did as well. So then Scott Frost gets hired. So fast forward, the most hope I had up until that point was, oh no, we have Scott Frost now. And then I get let down. And then going into this year, it's like, oh, Scott Frost, he retooled his staff. We got 14 new transfer portal additions. We're top 10 in transfer portal classes, blah, 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 blah. Here we go, baby. This is the year. And then I got let down. So now here we are, and Scott Frost has been fired, and Eric Chenander has been fired, and the team has had 2 games where they look like a completely different team. And so one might be tempted to say, oh, here we go. This is a new team. Here we go. Let's go. We're going to win the Big Ten West. Let's go. Let's go. I'm not going to be got. I'm not going to get got again by this team. Not to say that I don't believe in them, because I'll say this. If Nebraska, it's Nebraska versus Nebraska. If they show up and they play as good as they can play, they can win this game and maybe even surprise people. And I won't say kill them, but win by 2 scores, let's just say. But I don't want to predict that that's going to happen. I just don't want to predict that that's going to happen. That's my thought process. So
Okay.
I think the game will go like this. I think they will go up 17 to, they'll go up 10-0, and then they'll go up 17-7 at one point late in the game. And I think we'll come storming back, tie the game up, and then they'll get the ball back with too much time, and it'll end up 24-17 or 20-17. One of those two.
So you do have us cover the spread.
So I do have us covering the spread. But I don't have us winning the game. So I have a 24-17 win by Purdue.
Yeah. Okay, so while you were talking, 24-17 is your prediction. So I just was curious about our all-time meetings, when the last time we beat them was and all that. And the series is tied. Okay. It's it's tied. The home is 2-2, away is 3-3, and the last time we beat them was a COVID season. So we haven't really beat them because COVID. I give everybody a pass that year. I mean, we beat Penn State that year, and Penn State only won like 3 games.
Yeah,
so,
with Luke McCaffrey at quarterback.
Yeah,
Not Christian McCaffrey.
No.
I would have taken Christian McCaffrey at quarterback for sure.
Yeah, so the last time we like really beat them in a normal season, Mike Riley was head coach. So it's been a while
Big step.
since we.
This would be a big step.
Yeah, we haven't beat them in a meaningful game since Mike Riley, and the season was already over. So that you could even argue that wasn't really even a meaningful game. So yeah, so it's been a slobber knocker.
What's your prediction?
Sorry to
No, you're
dampen
good.
your spirit there. But I feel like something's got to give at some point. At some point, we are going to turn the corner because of how much talent we have on the team. We have more talent on our actual roster than Purdue. So if you look at it like that, something to give with these games of these teams that, we should be beating. It's not going to be this year, though. I just don't think it's going to be this year. I think eventually we'll turn the corner. And I'm not counting out the guys, but our offense past couple weeks has been kind of suspect. They haven't been, doing what Whipple really prides himself on doing, scoring a lot of points and, being that high-powered offense. So, in that vein, I'm going to say it's going to be 42-21, Purdue.
Wow. So
They're
you
going to
think our
score.
defense is going to fall apart too, huh?
Yes, but I think they're going to score. I think it's going to be, close going into the half. We might even have like a little bit of a lead. And I think they're going to go in. Purdue is and going to make some adjustments, and they're going to come out with a couple scores in the second half and stifle our offense a little bit. We probably even got some injuries that made it insurmountable, and it just feels like that's going to happen.
We'll see.
So
I think this is going to be close, man. I do. I don't see that happening. I hope it doesn't happen, but I think this is going to be close, man. I don't know if we're going to pull away with the win. Usually teams get spotted a couple points just for having the home field advantage, and I watched Purdue's first game against Penn State this year. That's a hell of an environment. It really is. When it's rocking and at night, it's legit. And Rutgers wasn't a real sellout. Let's just say that compared to this. But yeah, it's funny. You were talking about Scott Frost, and for some reason, what popped into my mind when you mentioned Scott Frost?
what?
That episode of SpongeBob when he's like, it's an episode of SpongeBob when he like won't go outside, and he's got like a penny and a chip and a napkin as a friend. Scott Frost is the gorilla in that episode because he's scared to go outside because he's scared of a gorilla, and the gorilla looks all mean and tough, and then by the end of the episode, he realizes it's just a guy in a gorilla suit. And the gorilla rides off on a guy in a horse suit. That's kind of what Scott Frost's tenure at Nebraska felt like. They're on to us. Yeah. I know it's a super random thought, but I had to get it in there before we ended.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess we should end it there. I don't have anything else to say, so I think that's going to be it for us today on the Cornhusker Corner. Always remember that there's no place like
This podcast.